I hadn't seen my sister, Victoria, in almost 2 years, not since Dad's stroke. We didn't talk much, mostly because she preferred to talk about me, not to me. But there we were, standing under the same church roof again, pretending to mourn the same man. The air inside Street Michael's smelled like lilies and hypocrisy. Everyone in town showed up. Dad had been a well-known attorney in Austin, the kind of man people respected because he never raised his voice, just his eyebrow. I stood near the front pew in uniform, quiet, polished, the way the Air Force trained me to be. Victoria made sure everyone noticed her entrance. She wore black like it was a performance, pearls, heels, the whole courtroom queen look. She didn't even make it past the condolences before the whispers started. Is she really in the military? I heard her say it soft, sharp, and smiling. The words floated just loud enough to reach the second row. You know how Morgan exaggerates. It's not like she's in combat or anything. She works in an office, for God's sake. The woman next to her gave a polite laugh. I didn't move. Years in service teach you how to stay still when you want to break something. But that smile, the one she gave while staring straight at my uniform, cut deeper than any insult. During the eulogy, Victoria stood up to speak about Dad's values, conveniently leaving out how she hadn't visited him in the hospital once. When she turned toward me at the end, her voice sweetened like poisoned honey. And my sister, she said, pausing just long enough for effect, always wanted to make him proud, even if some of her stories didn't exactly match reality. People shifted in their seats. My jaw tightened. The chaplain glanced at me as if checking whether I'd explode right there beside the casket. But I didn't. I waited. I let her finish her little show. After the service, she cornered me near the reception hall, where the smell of coffee mixed with fake sympathy. You could have at least worn a real medal, she said quietly, her smile never dropping. Dad hated lies, you know. I stared at her long enough for the silence to sting. He also hated arrogance, I said, keeping my tone calm. Looks like we both disappointed him. Her face twitched. She wasn't used to being called out, especially not in front of a dozen family friends holding paper plates of banana bread. That was the first time I realized she wasn't just jealous. She was furious that I'd built something she couldn't touch. Respect earned, not inherited. When I walked out into the parking lot, the Texas sun hit like a spotlight. My uniform felt heavier than usual, not from the medals, but from the eyes burning into my back. By the time I reached my car, I already knew one thing. Funerals don't bury family drama, they dig it up. If you've ever been betrayed by family and kept your dignity anyway, leave a comment below. I read every story. And if you love true family revenge stories that hit deep, subscribe because this one's just getting started. The wind carried the last bell of the church as I closed my car door, and somewhere behind me, Victoria's voice rose again, sharp, calculated, and way too confident for someone who had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing like an alarm I didn't set. Messages, missed calls, and one photo from a college friend, a screenshot of a Facebook post. There she was, Victoria standing in front of Dad's casket, one hand on her heart, the other holding a tissue like she'd just come from Broadway. The caption read, "Goodbye, Daddy. I'll keep protecting your legacy, even when others pretend to serve something they never truly did." I stared at it for a long time. Pretend to serve? She knew exactly what she was doing. The post already had 200 likes, and a parade of comments praising her for being the strong one. Some even hinted at that military thing being exaggerated. I didn't bother replying. You don't wrestle pigs. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. Instead, I put on my uniform and drove straight to Dad's house. The lawyer was meeting us to go over the estate, and I wasn't about to give her the stage again. When I arrived, Victoria was already sitting at the dining table, sipping coffee like she owned the place. Her husband, Grant, was beside her, scrolling his phone, avoiding eye contact. Grant always avoided conflict unless Victoria told him to join it. "Morning," I said. She looked up, her smile sharp as glass. "Oh, the hero arrives. Tell me, Captain, is that uniform regulation for brunch?" I ignored her and turned to Mr. Hall, Dad's attorney, who looked like he wanted to sink into his briefcase. "Let's get started." Oh. The will was straightforward. Dad divided his assets equally, but the house was to be sold, and proceeds donated to a veterans scholarship fund. I could almost feel Victoria's blood pressure spike. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "He would never give away his home for charity. That's manipulation." Mr. Hall calmly adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Ellis, the document is notarized and witnessed. Your father was very clear about his intentions." She glared at me. "Of course he was. Because you put that idea in his head. You and your little uniform tricks. Do you even have clearance for what you claim you do?" I didn't answer. Silence, I've learned, is louder than shouting. She took it as an admission. "That's what I thought. You're not a real soldier, Morgan. You push papers for the government and wear the costume for sympathy." Grant coughed awkwardly. "Vic may be not here." She spun on him. "Oh, please. Everyone in this room is thinking it." Then back to me, voice shaking with anger. "You embarrass this family with your lies. Dad's gone, but I'll make sure people know the truth." I leaned back in my chair. "Go ahead," I said quietly. "Just make sure you understand what truth means before you try to prove it." That sentence stopped her, but only for a second. Later that day, I walked out of the house into the dry Austin heat, my head pounding. For a moment, I almost pitied her. She'd built her whole identity on being the smartest person in the room, and now she was watching it crumble. But pity doesn't change people, it only makes them bolder. 2 days later, I found out how bold she could be. A colleague from the base called me. "Hey, Captain Ellis," he said carefully. "You might want to check your email. Something's circulating." It was an anonymous report sent to my command questioning the validity of my service record. It claimed I forged my deployment documents and wasn't eligible for federal benefits. Attached were screenshots of social media posts and some badly edited PDFs meant to look like official forms. There was only one person who'd go that far. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the screen, half in disbelief, half in admiration. It takes a special kind of malice to weaponize bureaucracy. She didn't want to argue anymore. She wanted to destroy my credibility. For a few seconds, I felt that old ache, the same one from childhood when she'd twist every victory into proof that I was lucky, not worthy. But this time, something different settled in calm, cold, surgical. I called my base legal officer. "Captain Morgan Ellis," I said. "I need to file a formal statement about a false accusation of impersonating military service, and I'll need the Inspector General looped in." He hesitated. "That's serious. You're sure about this?" "I'm sure," I said, "and tell them I'll bring evidence." That night, I didn't sleep. I organized every certificate, deployment order, and clearance letter I'd earned. Every line signed in ink, every page stamped with my name. Years of quiet service reduced to paperwork, but it was all I needed. When dawn came, the sunlight hit the stack of documents like a spotlight. Proof of truth, neat and unshakable. I brewed coffee, checked my reflection, and smiled. If my sister wanted a war, she'd get one, just not the kind she could win in public. The kettle clicked off, and I heard my phone buzz again. This time, it wasn't a message, it was a notification. "Victoria Ellis tagged you in a post." The caption read, "Imagine wearing a uniform you didn't earn. Some people have no shame." And below it my photo, taken from the funeral. The sound that came out of me wasn't anger. It was a low laugh, quiet and controlled. Because while she was busy posting, I was already moving 3 steps ahead. The next move wouldn't be on social media. It would be in court. And unlike her, I knew exactly what rules to play by. The moment I stepped out of my office that Friday, the sky looked heavy, like it already knew what was coming. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until I heard the voice on the other end. "Captain Ellis?" The man sounded official, clipped, detached. "This is Travis County Civil Court. We're calling to confirm receipt of your summons." For a second, I thought I misheard. "Summons for what?" "Defamation and fraudulent representation of military service," he said, reading it like a grocery list. "Filed by Victoria Ellis." The line went quiet. Even the air felt thinner. My own sister had officially taken it to court. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice steady. "Please email the documents to my counsel." End of quote. I didn't have a counsel yet, but that wasn't the point. I refused to give her the satisfaction of panic. When I hung up, I sat in my car and laughed, once short, sharp, humorless. She'd done it. She'd actually weaponized the legal system, just to humiliate me. It wasn't enough to call me a fraud online. She wanted headlines, courtrooms, and a public stage. Fine, she'd get all three. That evening, I drove to San Antonio to see someone who knew how to fight battles that didn't involve weapons. Major Samuel Ward. He was now a military attorney, a man who could quote both the Uniform Code of Military Justice and Shakespeare in one breath. He didn't even look surprised when I told him. "Family cases are always the dirtiest," he said, flipping through the screenshots I brought. "But this isn't just a family issue anymore. She's accusing you of violating the Stolen Valor Act." "All may." "That's federal," I said quietly. "Exactly," he replied, tapping the papers. "Which means if we handle this right, she's about to walk into a minefield of her own making." We spent hours building a strategy. The first step wasn't to fight back, it was to gather proof from the highest possible authority. "You'll need verification from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence," he said. "It'll take time, but once it's sealed, no judge can question it." He leaned back. "Tell me, Captain, are you ready to make this official?" I nodded. "She wants a war. Let's make it federal." The next morning, I filed my request through OUSDI channels, the kind that don't move fast unless they see your record and recognize your clearance level. Luckily, mine wasn't up for debate. I attached every deployment order, commendation, and clearance verification. Then I added a personal note. "This verification is requested for court submission under civil litigation regarding false impersonation allegations." When I hit send, a sense of calm washed over me. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was accountability, wrapped in protocol and sealed with signatures. Meanwhile, Victoria went into full performance mode. Within a week, local news picked up her story. Austin attorney files suit against sister over fake military claims. Her photo was everywhere, confident, righteous, perfectly lit for sympathy. She gave interviews, tears glistening just right under studio lights. "I love my sister," she said, "but integrity matters. I couldn't stand by while someone disrespected real heroes." Real heroes. I almost admired the precision of her cruelty. She didn't just want to ruin me, she wanted to rewrite the story so she could play the victim. By the time my neighbors saw me, they looked away. One even said, "Tough break, Captain." I didn't bother correcting him. Let them talk. The louder the noise got, the easier it would be to expose the silence that followed. At night, I reviewed her interviews, not with anger but strategy. Every word she said was another thread I could pull apart in court. Every claim she made would backfire the moment the truth hit the record. One clip stood out, her sitting at her desk, polished and confident, saying, "If my sister's telling the truth, she should have no problem proving it in front of a judge." That line stayed with me. When I walked into Major Ward's office the next morning, he looked up from his laptop. "They just served you, huh?" "Yeah," I said, dropping the envelope on his desk. "And I plan to give her exactly what she asked for." He smiled. "You're dangerous when you're calm." I won. "Calm gets the job done," I said. We drafted a countersuit for defamation and harassment. Nothing flashy, just facts, evidence, and federal codes. I knew how the system worked. Bureaucracy could crush you if you fought it emotionally, but if you stayed methodical, it could destroy lies with surgical precision. 3 days later, the official acknowledgement from OUSDI came through. A short, sealed statement confirming my service status, clearance, and current assignment under classified operations. The document wasn't flashy, it didn't need to be. A simple federal header and an authorization line signed by a colonel carried more weight than any accusation. Ward looked at me as he sealed the envelope. "This right here," he said, "is your weapon. And the moment it's opened in court, the entire case flips." I nodded. "Let her talk. I'll bring silence." When I left his office, the air felt cooler. Outside, the flag over the courthouse fluttered in slow, deliberate rhythm. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel humiliated, I felt focused. Victoria could have her followers, her sympathy interviews, her dramatics. I had something better. Proof. And in my world, Proof outranks everything. The next day started like a mission brief. I woke up before dawn, laced my boots, and wrote a list every step, every contingency. In the military, clarity keeps you alive. In civilian life, it keeps you sane. This wasn't going to be an emotional fight. It was going to be an operation. I headed to base early, the cold air biting at my face as I crossed the lot. My colleagues nodded, unaware that my off-duty life was now a legal battlefield. In my head, I could still hear Victoria's voice echoing from those interviews, sugar-coated venom passing for moral outrage. At 0700, I met with Major Ward again. He looked at me like a man about to walk into a chess match with live ammo. "I've reviewed her case," he said. "It's mostly noise. But it's loud noise, and loud can still hurt." I sat down across from him. "Then we drown it out with facts," he nodded. "We'll submit your verification letter from OUSDI through sealed motion. That will put the case under a federal confidentiality clause. If the judge accepts it, Victoria can't use any of this for publicity." That part made me smile. "So she loses her audience." Ward smirked. "Exactly." We spent the next few hours refining every detail. He drafted a motion referencing Title 18, Section 704, and cited the Stolen Valor Act. Every line was clean, clinical, and lethal in the right hands. The plan wasn't to fight her emotionally, it was to corner her legally until she imploded. Afterward, I grabbed lunch at a small diner near Fort Sam. The waitress called me ma'am and smiled at the uniform. It reminded me why I did all this in the first place. Why I'd served, why I'd stayed quiet for years while people like Victoria treated service like a costume. You don't wear the flag for applause. You wear it because it's earned. When I got home that night, I found an envelope waiting on the porch. No return address. Inside was a printed copy of a blog post. Exposing a military imposter. How my sister lied to our family for years. I almost laughed. The article was written like a confession mixed with a Hallmark movie. Her version of events painted her as a tragic hero, fighting for truth against her delusional sister. It even quoted anonymous friends from our childhood. Half the details were wrong, the other half twisted into theater. I poured a drink, read every word, then shredded it. She wasn't just attacking my name, she was testing my patience. And patience, ironically, was something the Air Force taught me to weaponize. The next morning, I drove to the federal building in downtown Austin. Colonel Pierce, my former commanding officer and current liaison with OUSDI, met me in the security lobby. He looked older, a bit grayer, but his handshake was still firm. "I heard about the circus," he said. "She really went this far?" "Farther," I said. "She's suing me for being who I am." He studied me for a moment, then reached into his briefcase. "Here's your verification. Sealed and signed. Do not open it unless instructed by the court." I took the folder heavy cardstock, red security stamp across the flap. The seal shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. Pierce's voice dropped lower. "You understand what this means, right? Once the judge opens this, it becomes a federal matter. No more local drama, no more talk shows. This moves into classified territory." I nodded. "That's the goal." He grinned. "Then make it surgical, Captain. Precision, not emotion." "Always," I said. By the time I left the building, the Texas heat had kicked in. The folder felt warm in my hand, like it carried its own gravity. Every step toward my car felt deliberate, measured, rehearsed. This was the calm before an airstrike. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, this time surrounded by papers, not emotions. Ward's motion, my affidavits, Pierce's sealed verification, all neatly organized into one black binder. The war Victoria started wasn't going to end with tears or apologies. It would end with silence, signatures, and a gavel. At 2,300 hours, I sent Ward a message, "All documents in order. Proceeding as planned." He replied 2 minutes later. "Good." She wanted proof. Let's give her the kind she can't handle. For the first time in weeks, I slept straight through the night. No noise, no calls, no memories clawing at me. Just silence, the kind that comes when the strategy is locked, the evidence airtight, and the target too arrogant to see what's coming. And while Austin buzzed with gossip and speculation, I knew one thing with military certainty. Once this case hit court, no one, not Victoria, not the press, not the public would ever mistake a soldier's silence for weakness again. The first sign that things had escalated beyond control came from a news alert on my phone. Local attorney speaks out, family betrayal and fake valor. It was her again. This time, not just in a quote but live, on Austin Morning Now. I didn't even have to press play to imagine it. Her posture perfect, tone sincere, tears ready on command. But I watched anyway. Victoria sat across from the host, wearing that same black dress she'd worn to Dad's funeral, as if grief had become her wardrobe. "I never wanted this to go public," she said, looking down like the weight of her own virtue might crush her. "But when someone steals honor, especially from our troops, you have to speak up, even if it's family." "Oliver." The host leaned forward, eating it up. "You're saying your sister lied about serving in the Air Force?" She sighed dramatically. "I wish I wasn't. I begged her to come clean before it came to this, but she wouldn't. It's heartbreaking." There it was, the moment every viewer fell for her. The sad, brave sister, doing the right thing. Then the kicker. She's never been deployed overseas. She works in an office at a civilian contractor and wears a uniform to get attention. My father was heartbroken before he died. He told me himself, "She's not who she says she is." I turned off the screen. I didn't need to hear more. Lies, neatly arranged like pearls on her necklace. An hour later, my inbox exploded. Emails from strangers. Hate messages. One said, "Disgrace to the uniform." Another wrote, "You should be ashamed." That night, the story spread beyond Texas. National networks picked it up, using her soundbites with words like scandal, fraud, and betrayal. Her performance had gone viral. I sat at my desk, the lamp casting a soft glow over the sealed envelope from OUSDI. It hadn't been opened yet, but I could feel its power. One document, and all her lies would collapse. But timing mattered. In war, you don't drop the payload just because the target yells loud, you wait for the right coordinates. So I waited. Major Ward called that evening. "You saw the circus?" "Front row seat," I said. He grunted. "She's walking straight into her own trap. The judge just advanced your motion. Once that envelope's opened, this whole thing goes under federal classification. She won't be able to speak another word publicly without facing contempt." "Good," I said. She wanted an audience. Now she'll have a courtroom instead. Still, the fallout hit harder than I expected. The next day, a reporter showed up outside my base housing, camera in hand, microphone ready. "Captain Ellis, do you have a comment on your sister's accusations?" I looked her dead in the eye and said, "No comment. Let the record speak for itself." They aired that clip on the evening news, cutting right before I walked away. The anchor added, "No denial from Captain Ellis. Silence often says more than words." Perfect. Let them misinterpret silence. It would make the truth louder later. That weekend, I went to visit Dad's grave. I hadn't been back since the funeral. The air was still, the grass freshly cut. I brought a small flag, not because of ceremony, but because I needed to remind myself why I was doing this. "Guess she's still talking for both of us," I said softly. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll handle it my way." When I got home, the noise online had grown into chaos. Hashtags, threads, armchair analysts, everyone had a theory. Some defended me, but most didn't. The internet always prefers a villain. Then, just as I was scrolling through one of her interviews, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time, it was the judge's office. "Captain Ellis," the clerk said, "the court has accepted your sealed motion for verification. You are scheduled for hearing next Thursday at 9 a.m. I exhaled slowly. "Understood." "Also," she added, "your sister's legal team filed a motion requesting media access to the hearing." That one made me laugh out loud. Of course she did. She wanted cameras, applause, and an audience. She didn't realize the moment those federal seals hit the table, the cameras would turn off. That night, I watched her latest appearance. She'd traded sympathy for smugness. "I'm confident the truth will come out in court," she said, smiling just enough to sound righteous. "My sister can't hide behind fake paperwork forever." I muted the TV, and poured a glass of water. My reflection in the window looked calm, steady. Years of training had taught me how to breathe through turbulence, how to focus when chaos tried to swallow you. She was fighting for attention. I was fighting for truth. Different weapons, different wars. I picked up the sealed envelope and turned it in my hands. "You wanted a show," I said quietly. "You're about to get a lesson instead." Outside, thunder rolled across the Texas sky. The kind of storm that doesn't announce itself, it just arrives, swift and absolute. The sound lingered, low and steady, as I placed the envelope back on the table. Proof doesn't shout. It waits. By the time the hearing date came around, the story had turned into a wildfire. Every local channel had a segment titled, "The Soldier and the Sister." Victoria's photo, smiling, sympathetic, perfectly lit, was everywhere. Mine was a cropped headshot from the base website, under the caption, "Claims Disputed." On paper, she looked like the hero. That was fine. Paper was about to become my weapon. I got to the courthouse an hour early. Major Ward was already there, suit pressed, eyes sharp behind his glasses. He handed me a coffee and a thin folder. "Everything's in place," he said. "The judge received our sealed verification through the marshal's office. It hasn't been opened yet." He paused, lowering his voice. "But once it is, this whole case moves into classified territory. You ready for that?" I met his eyes. "Born ready." "And they're ready, eh?" We went over our plan one more time. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting matches, no emotional speeches. Just a controlled detonation, paperwork, protocol, and precision. When Victoria arrived, she made sure everyone saw her. Cameras clicked as she stepped out of her car in a tailored gray suit, surrounded by her legal team. She gave one of those polite, pained smiles to the reporters. "I'm just here for the truth," she said. "That's all I've ever wanted." Odd. Ward leaned close to me and muttered, "She should have been an actress." I didn't reply. My focus was locked on the sealed manila envelope resting on the judge's desk, marked with a red federal seal. It looked ordinary, unassuming. But that thin layer of paper held the power to rewrite everything. When court opened, the room felt smaller than I remembered. The hum of whispers, the shuffle of papers, the faint squeak of polished shoes. My mother sat behind Victoria, hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't look at me. The judge, a man in his 60s, with the patience of a saint, adjusted his glasses. "Counsel, we are here to address the contested claim regarding the late Harold Ellis's estate. Miss Victoria Ellis, your team has filed additional statements alleging fraudulent military representation by your sister, Captain Morgan Ellis. Is that correct?" Victoria stood, her confidence rehearsed. "Yes, Your Honor. I've provided documentation to demonstrate that my sister has never been deployed, never received official discharge papers, and misled our father about her service for personal gain." Ward didn't flinch. "We dispute every word of that, Your Honor," he said calmly, "and we've submitted a federal verification to confirm Captain Ellis's service under classified conditions." The judge frowned slightly. "Classified conditions?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ward continued. "The document in question was issued by the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, under directive authorization. It verifies service that, by nature of its classification, cannot be publicly detailed." The judge looked at the envelope again, curiosity flickering across his face. Victoria's lawyer, a young, overly confident man named Daniels, laughed softly. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this seems awfully convenient. A Secret Service record? No proof, just a mystery letter we can't read?" Ward didn't even look at him. "Your Honor, I'd request that the envelope be opened and reviewed in camera. Once you read it, the court will understand why this case cannot proceed in open session." The judge hesitated, weighing the moment. The tension was thick enough to hum. Then, without a word, he gestured to the bailiff. The man carried the envelope to the bench, his expression neutral. The judge broke the red wax seal with a soft snap. The room went dead silent. He unfolded the single sheet. His eyes moved quickly across the text, then slowed. His hand trembled slightly as he read further. The color drained from his face, replaced by something else: recognition. When he finally looked up, the weight in his stare could have silenced an entire battalion. "Counsel," he said slowly, This court will recess immediately. Officers seal these doors. End of quote. The order hit the room like a detonation. The bailiff turned the locks with two heavy clunks that echoed through the air. Cameras flashed once, then stopped as marshals moved to block them. Victoria froze, her mouth slightly open. Your Honor? What does that mean? The judge ignored her. He handed the document to the clerk, his tone firm. This court is now under federal restriction. No further statements are to be made on record. I won. Daniels started to object, but the judge cut him off with a glare sharp enough to cut steel. Sit down, counselor. Ward remained perfectly calm, hands folded. I didn't move either. Years of field discipline made stillness easy. Finally, the judge looked directly at Victoria. His voice softened, but it carried an edge that made the room feel colder. Miss Ellis, the document I've reviewed confirms your sister's active service in a capacity this court is not authorized to question. Your allegations are now part of a sealed federal record. Any further attempt to publicize this matter could be construed as a breach of national security. Victoria's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her confident mask cracked. For the first time, she looked small. The judge turned to me, his tone shifting to respect. Captain Ellis, my apologies for this ordeal. You've served this country honorably. We will proceed to finalize the execution of your father's will privately. I'm in. I nodded once. Understood, Your Honor. Ward leaned closer, whispering, That's checkmate. Behind us, Victoria sat frozen, pale, as the marshals quietly approached her. My mother reached for her hand, but Victoria didn't move. The heavy sound of the lock engaging again filled the room final, echoing, absolute. The war she started with words had just been ended by silence. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and cold coffee, the kind of place where lives don't end but shift quietly under the weight of decisions. I sat beside Major Ward, calm as stone. Years in intelligence had taught me that real battles were never loud. They were fought in silence, under fluorescent lights, with evidence instead of bullets. Across the aisle, Victoria looked immaculate as ever. Her pearl earrings gleamed under the overhead lights, her hair pinned in that perfect professional victim style. Her attorney, Daniels, whispered something to her that made her smile. It wasn't confidence, it was arrogance. The judge entered, and every sound disappeared. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the room, then began. We're reconvening to address the matter of the Ellis estate and the attached allegations. His eyes flicked to me, then to the envelope still sealed on his bench. All parties are reminded that the contents of this court, once verified, may be subject to federal restriction. Victoria crossed her legs and leaned forward, like she was watching her own performance unfold. Daniels rose first, clearly eager to finish what he thought was an easy win. Your Honor, my client simply asks that the truth be acknowledged. Her sister has long claimed military service that cannot be substantiated by public record. We've submitted ample proof that Captain Ellis— She's not a captain, Victoria interrupted, loud enough for everyone to hear. She's a fraud. The judge raised a hand, his patience visibly thinning. Miss Ellis, you will speak only when addressed. Her face tightened, but she sat back, whispering something to her lawyer. Ward stood. Your Honor, before we proceed, I respectfully move to have the sealed document reviewed. Its contents will settle this matter entirely. Allah. The judge gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. Bring it forward. The bailiff handed him the manila envelope. For a moment, no one breathed. When he broke the red wax seal, the sound was louder than it should have been, a small, deliberate act that cut through every whisper. He unfolded the paper inside. His eyes moved quickly across the lines, and then stopped. Silence fell again, heavy, absolute. When he finally looked up, the transformation in his face said everything. The practiced neutrality of a career judge was gone, replaced by a mix of shock and immediate comprehension. Officers, he said quietly, seal this courtroom. The bolts clicked into place. Cameras outside the door went dark. The journalists who had gathered for a headline now had none. Victoria's eyes darted around, panic beginning to creep in. What's happening? Why are they— The judge's voice cut through, cold and clear. Miss, Ellis, this court has reviewed official documentation from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. The contents confirm that your sister, Captain Morgan Ellis, serves in a capacity that is protected under national security law. You are to remain silent. He turned toward her attorney, who was visibly pale. Mr. Daniels, your client's statements on record constitute false testimony regarding a classified federal employee. I strongly suggest you refrain from further comment. Ward leaned toward me, whispering, "This is the sound of victory." The judge looked back at me, his tone shifting calm, reverent even. Captain Ellis, on behalf of this court, I extend our apologies. You've carried a service not meant to be defended here. We'll finalize the estate privately, under seal. I met his gaze and gave a single nod. Understood, Your Honor. Behind us, my mother's voice trembled. What? What does that mean? Victoria turned toward her, wide-eyed. For once, she had no words, just the realization that her entire narrative had turned to ash. The judge didn't answer her. Instead, he handed the document to the clerk and said, "This matter is now closed under federal jurisdiction. Anyone attempting to disclose or discuss these proceedings outside this courtroom will be in violation of national security law." The final word hung in the air. Law. Not opinion, not drama, just law. Victoria stood abruptly, her voice breaking. "This is insane. She's lying, you're all—" Two marshals moved toward her, firm but polite. "Ma'am, please step back." Her mother tried to stand too, but the weight of the silence pressed her down. Ward gathered our papers neatly, unhurried. "And that," he said under his breath, "is why you don't pick fights with people who understand classified procedure." When the judge dismissed the session, no one moved for several seconds. The marshals unlocked the doors, and the hallway beyond seemed brighter, too bright. As we stepped out, Ward turned to me. "They'll talk for weeks, but none of it will matter. The record's sealed, the case is closed." I nodded. "Let them talk. They'll run out of oxygen before I run out of peace." We walked past the reporters still waiting outside, their microphones raised in confusion. They didn't know the show was already over. No one said a word as I passed them, just the sound of camera shutters clicking against a silence they couldn't break. Victoria followed behind, flanked by two marshals. Her face was pale, her perfect hair slightly out of place. She caught my eye for a second, a silent plea, or maybe disbelief. But I didn't stop. I didn't speak. I'd spent a lifetime being the quiet one in her shadow. Now silence was my victory lap. Ward held the door open for me as we stepped out into the afternoon light. He said, "You ever notice? Justice never needs to shout." I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "It just needs proof." The moment the judge's gavel hit, the sound felt final like a lid sealing on a vault. The courtroom emptied slowly, one shuffle of shoes at a time, until it was just me, Ward, the bailiff, and the hum of fluorescent lights. The air felt heavier than before, like the room itself knew something sacred had just happened. Ward broke the silence first. "Captain, congratulations." That was surgical. I glanced toward the bench, where the manila envelope still rested beside the judge's papers. Its red wax seal had been split cleanly in half, its edges curling slightly. "That piece of paper changed everything," I said quietly. He nodded. "It didn't just change it ended it." Outside the courtroom, reporters were still waiting, cameras flashing the second the door opened. But when they saw the two U.S. Marshals step out behind us, every voice died down. For once, the vultures didn't know what story they were circling. Ward leaned in. "Keep walking, no comments. The less they get from you, the more they'll guess. And guesses won't matter anymore." We moved past them, the marble floor amplifying every step. Behind us, the heavy doors closed again, sealed, not by locks this time, but by law. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, the sound of a car engine cut through the static of murmuring voices. Two black SUVs were parked at the curb. One was ours, the other was for her. Victoria came out moments later, flanked by marshals. Her usual poise was gone. The woman who'd strutted into this courthouse, armed with vanity and microphones, now looked hollow. Her eyes darted across the crowd, searching for sympathy, or maybe control. Neither were there. She saw me at the bottom of the steps and stopped. For a second, Her expression softened, almost pleading. I didn't know if she wanted forgiveness, or if she simply couldn't comprehend losing. Either way, she got nothing. Ward murmured, "Keep moving, Captain." I turned, walking toward the car. The cameras behind me clicked again, sharp, rhythmic, meaningless. When we reached the vehicle, Ward opened the door, but paused. "You know, in 20 years of practicing law, I've never seen a courtroom sealed like that for a family dispute. You just made legal history." I gave a dry half-smile. "Not the kind I'll be writing home about." He chuckled. "Maybe not, but the kind they'll whisper about." As the car pulled away, I looked back once through the window. Victoria was still standing there, surrounded by everything she'd wanted: attention, drama, spectacle. But none of it mattered anymore. Because now, the silence belonged to me. We drove in silence for a while before Ward spoke again. "You know what's funny?" he said. "She kept calling you a fraud for having no public record. Turns out, that's exactly what made your record untouchable." I looked out the window, the city moving by in blurs of glass and light. She spent her life needing to be seen. I spent mine needing to disappear. Guess which one held up better? He smiled faintly. Fair point. When we got back to his office, Ward went to file the last of the paperwork. I waited in the hallway where a small plaque read, "Integrity above all." The words hit harder than I expected. For years, I'd let my family define me: quiet, strange, the failure who never fit their mold. Now, for the first time, I wasn't living under their definition. I was standing under my own. As we wrapped up, Ward handed me a final copy of the court's sealed order. "Keep this for your records," he said. "It's basically a legal fortress now. No one can access the file without clearance." I nodded, tucking it carefully into my briefcase. "Good. I'm done living my life in their headlines. I'll end for." He looked at me for a long moment. "You handled this with more restraint than most people could." "I wasn't fighting for revenge," I said. "I was fighting for peace. There's a difference." When I got home that evening, the sun was just starting to dip below the horizon. The light hit the framed medals on my wall, quiet acknowledgments of things no one outside the service would ever understand. I took the verification letter, now unsealed, and placed it in a small wooden box beside them. For a long time, I just sat there, the room silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Mom." I hesitated before opening it. The words were exactly what I expected. "Victoria's being questioned. Her law license could be suspended. She's devastated. Please, Morgan, can't you fix this? You know people. Tell them she didn't mean it." I read it twice, then set the phone down. No anger, no heartbreak, just a strange, clear calm. Fixing things had been my role my entire life. The peacemaker, the reliable one. The sister who swallowed humiliation for the sake of family harmony. But that version of me had stayed behind in that sealed courtroom. I opened the window, letting the cool evening air drift in. Somewhere far off, a plane cut across the pink horizon. The sound reminded me of deployment days when silence wasn't weakness but survival. I picked up my phone again, stared at the message for a moment longer, then deleted it. No response. No explanation. Just peace. Because sometimes, silence isn't the absence of words. It's the end of giving them power. And in that quiet, I finally realized what victory actually sounded like. The Monday after the court hearing, Austin's news cycle was still buzzing, except this time, the story wasn't about me. It was about her. Headlines read, "Prominent attorney under federal investigation after false allegations in classified case." The irony was almost poetic. Victoria had spent months feeding the press, and now they were feeding on her. I sat in the base cafeteria, half listening to a morning briefing, while the TV over the coffee counter played the segment. Her photo filled the screen: no makeup, hair pulled back, eyes red. She looked like someone who'd just woken up from a dream that had turned into a nightmare. The anchor's voice carried that rehearsed tone of sympathy, the kind used when a scandal becomes too ugly to sensationalize. Sources confirm that the federal court sealed all details of the case last week, citing national security. The Ellis family has declined to comment. One of my unit officers glanced at the TV, then at me. That your sister, Captain? I sipped my coffee. Not anymore. The officer nodded quietly, understanding more from my tone than my words. Later that afternoon, I walked across the base airfield. The wind was sharp, the sky washed in pale blue. My boots echoed against the tarmac. I'd walked that same stretch before deployments, before missions, before long nights of classified work that would never appear in any newspaper. Now I was walking it for closure. By evening, my inbox filled with messages from people who used to doubt me, neighbors, extended family, even an old high school friend who'd once called me boring. Every message started the same way. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I didn't reply to any of them. Not out of spite, but because apologies offered after the truth comes out mean nothing. They're just echoes of guilt. Ward called later that night. She's in deep, he said. Federal investigators are reviewing her filings for perjury. The local bar association's already involved. I didn't ask for details. Will she lose her license? Probably. She might face a misdemeanor or two. Depends how much she wants to cooperate. He hesitated. You want me to intervene? File anything to ease the pressure? I looked out the window, at the lights scattered across the base like constellations. No. Let the system do what it's supposed to. He was quiet for a second. You're not even angry, are you? Anger's expensive, I said. Peace is cheaper. He laughed softly. You really were made for intelligence work. The next morning, the inevitable happened. My mother showed up at my house unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, clutching her purse like it might save her. She looked smaller than I remembered. Age had crept into her face in the past year, but it wasn't time doing the damage, it was guilt. Morgan, she said softly, can I come in? I let her. Not out of warmth, but because I didn't want another ghost haunting the porch. She sat on the edge of the couch, eyes darting around the room like she was searching for the daughter she'd never really seen. Your sister's. She's not well. She's scared. She should be, I said evenly. Please, she whispered. You've always been the reasonable one. Can't you just make a call? Fix this? The phrase, fix this, hit like a blade. That was always my job. The one who made peace, who swallowed pride, who cleaned up the messes my family left behind. No, I said simply. Her eyes filled. You don't understand. This could ruin her life. I met her gaze. She tried to ruin mine. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the slow tick of the wall clock. Then I stood up, walked to the mantel, and picked up the small wooden box that held my service verification letter. I placed it gently on the table in front of her. This, I said, is what she called fake. This is what she tried to destroy. It's not just paper. It's every night I didn't sleep. Every mission I can't talk about. Every friend who never came home. My mother's eyes fell to the box, but she didn't reach for it. I didn't know, she said quietly. You didn't want to, I replied. She wiped her eyes and whispered, your father would be proud of you. I know, I said. He always was. Oh. When she left, the house felt lighter. The kind of quiet that wasn't lonely, just clean. 2 days later, the final notice came through. The court had officially closed the Ellis estate. My share was transferred. My father's personal letter archived under seal. The case could never be reopened. That evening, I got an email from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. The subject line read, Acknowledgement of Confidential Service. Inside, it was one simple line. For actions conducted with discretion, precision, and integrity. It wasn't a medal, but it meant more than one. I printed it, framed it, and hung it beside my father's old flight jacket. The same one he'd worn the day I told him I was enlisting, and he said, just promise me one thing, kid, don't let the noise change you. He'd be proud, I thought. Not because I'd won, but because I'd done it without losing myself. Outside, thunder rolled again across the Texas sky. I stood at the window, watching lightning cut through the dark. For the first time in a long time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like peace taking its rightful place. 6 months passed before I realized how far away the chaos had drifted. The world kept spinning, news cycles forgot, reporters moved on, and the Ellis name stopped trending. For the first time in years, my life was defined by quiet again, but this time it wasn't the silence of being ignored, it was the peace of being free. The invitation came in a plain envelope with no insignia, just a single line, Hall of Valor, Defense Intelligence Agency, Arlington. I knew what it meant before I even opened it. There's no public RSVP, no announcements, no ceremonies on live TV. The Hall of Valor isn't about applause. It's about acknowledgement, quiet, private, and earned. That morning, I put on my dress uniform. Every ribbon, every insignia placed exactly as it should be. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the librarian my family once mocked. I saw a soldier who had served without recognition and survived without validation. The event itself was small, maybe 20 people, all with faces that had seen too much and spoken too little. We gathered in a windowless room lined with plaques. Each one told a story that would never be printed anywhere, stories that existed only among those who understood their weight. General Pierce was there, the same man who had given me my service verification envelope. He stood at the podium, reading a list of names and commendations. When he said mine, it wasn't loud, but the room went still. Captain Morgan Ellis for exceptional integrity and operational precision in classified assignments contributing to national security. End quote. He stepped forward and pinned the Defense Intelligence Director's Award just above my left breast pocket. The metal was cool against the fabric, its shine muted under the fluorescent lights. He met my eyes for a moment. "You handled yourself with more discipline than some entire commands," he said quietly. "That courtroom incident made it to the director's desk. It was reviewed, and, let's just say the right people noticed." I smiled faintly. "Appreciate it, sir." He nodded once. "You didn't just protect your name. You reminded people that silence can still be strength." When the ceremony ended, no one clapped. No one needed to. Instead, there were small nods, quiet handshakes, and looks of mutual respect, the kind that only come from shared secrets. Afterward, we stood together by the display cases along the back wall. Some held flags, others old photos. Most held only engraved names. Every single one represented a story that would never be told, victories no one would ever know about, sacrifices never made public. That's when I realized something. What my sister craved her entire life was the spotlight. What I had chosen, what I had earned, was the shadow. When I left the hall, the air outside was crisp. The sun hit the Pentagon in the distance, its surface catching gold for a moment, before fading back into gray. It was beautiful, in a quiet kind of way. I drove back to Austin that night, with the medal still pinned to my uniform. I didn't take it off when I got home. Instead, I hung it beside my father's photo, the one of him in his flight jacket, holding me as a toddler, both of us squinting into the wind. The next morning, I opened my laptop, expecting the usual encrypted messages, but there was something else, an email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Victoria. The subject line just said, "Please." For a second, I almost deleted it. Then I opened it. "Morgan, I know you don't owe me anything. I just wanted you to know that I lost my license. I lost the firm. I lost everything. I didn't understand what you gave up all those years. I just wanted to be seen. But I see you now. I really do. I'm sorry." I read it twice, then once more. The apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't enough. But it was the first honest thing she'd ever written. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, just because I'd already forgiven her. Quietly, in the way soldiers forgive time for taking what it does. Some wounds don't need words, they just need distance. That evening, I went for a run around the perimeter trail behind the base. The wind carried the smell of rain and cut grass. Somewhere, thunder rolled again, that same Texas sound that had followed every turning point of my life. I thought about my father's will, about the clause that started all of this. I wished to acknowledge my daughter's quiet, unseen service to our country. He'd been right about the word unseen. But unseen doesn't mean unworthy. As I slowed to a stop, I looked up at the darkening sky and felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride without pain. Because I didn't need a courtroom or a broadcast or even a medal to prove who I was. The truth had already done that for me. And in that simple, quiet certainty, I realized something my sister never would. That dignity isn't something people give you. It's something you carry. It was late, almost midnight, when the phone buzzed again. I almost didn't check it, but old habits die hard, and silence makes you suspicious. The message preview on the screen stopped me cold. Mom. I hadn't heard from her since the day she came to plead for Victoria. I opened it slowly, the way you would approach a live wire. Morgan, please. She's not herself. She's drinking, she's talking about leaving the country. The investigators are still asking questions. Can you talk to someone? Maybe they'll listen to you. Please, don't let her life fall apart. I set the phone down on the counter, next to the cooling cup of tea I hadn't touched. The steam had already vanished, so had my patience. I'd spent my whole life fixing things. I fixed family arguments before they became public. I fixed bills when Dad's health declined. I even fixed the messes Victoria made in college, calling lawyers, pulling strings, all while she laughed about how dramatic people could be. Now, for the first time, I wasn't going to fix anything. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off the phone and stared out the kitchen window. The city lights of Austin flickered against the dark hills, distant, untouchable. I'd fought battles on 3 continents, worked in rooms without windows, and faced men who lied for a living. None of them had ever exhausted me the way family did. When I finally went to bed, I dreamed of the courtroom again, the echo of the gavel, the silence after the locks clicked shut. Except this time, there was no judge. Just me, standing in a room full of mirrors, each one reflecting a version of the sister I used to be the peacemaker, the invisible one, the one who swallowed pain to keep harmony alive. I woke up at 0400, breathing hard but calm. I'd made my decision. By 0600, I was back on base. The smell of jet fuel always steadied me. I found Colonel Pierce in his office, flipping through after-action reports. "Morning, Captain," he said without looking up. "You're early." "I need a favor," I said. He glanced up, his expression shifting immediately. "What kind of favor?" "I want to make sure no one reopens that case. No leaks, no inquiries, no half-truths floating around. I want this sealed tighter than NORAD's command vault." He studied me for a long second, then nodded slowly. "You know, the department's already classified at level 2. But if you want, I can push for level 3 restricted even to oversight committees. It'll disappear." "Do it," I said. "For everyone's sake. And Ed." He gave me a look, half respect, half concern. "You're doing this for her." "No," I said quietly. "I'm doing it for peace." That afternoon, I received the formal notice. The case had been sealed indefinitely under federal protection. It was as if it never existed. At home that night, I poured myself a drink and stood at the mantel, staring at my father's picture. "You raised 2 daughters," I murmured. "One obsessed with being seen, and one who learned to vanish. Guess we both stayed true to type." The phone buzzed again later. Another message from Mom. This one shorter. "She's moving out of Austin. I don't know where. I just hope one day you'll talk again." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked outside to the porch. The night air was cool, quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed across the dark. It wasn't sad, just distant, the sound of something moving on. Unstoppable. As I stood there, I thought about all the noise my sister had made, her interviews, her speeches, her desperate need to control the narrative. And how, in the end, the silence I'd chosen had done more damage than any public retaliation ever could. There's a power in stillness most people never understand. It doesn't announce itself. It just changes the landscape around it until everyone finally stops to notice what's missing: the noise, the drama, the chaos. The next morning, I opened my email to a message from the DIA. It wasn't about awards or missions this time. Just a brief notice. "Captain Ellis, your reassignment to Strategic Operations Division has been approved. Report to Arlington within 30 days. A new post. A clean slate. Before heading out for my morning run, I looked back at the sealed wooden box on my table, the one that held the verification letter and my medal. I traced the edge of the lid with my finger, then whispered, "You did good, Dad." The quiet one turned out fine. The sun was just breaking over the horizon when I started running. The air was sharp, alive, the way it gets before a storm clears out completely. I ran until the base came into view, until the weight of everything behind me began to dissolve into the rhythm of my breathing. No victory speech, no final confrontation, just motion, just distance. Because peace doesn't need to be declared. It's earned, step by step, in silence. It was raining the day I packed up my house in Austin. The kind of soft, steady rain that made the whole world sound like it was breathing slower. I didn't hire movers. I didn't need to. Most of what I owned fit neatly into 3 boxes: uniforms, service medals, and the few books that had followed me through every base I'd ever served on. When I reached the last box on the table, the wooden one with my verification letter inside, I paused. The red wax seal had been broken months ago, but the paper inside remained untouched, still folded precisely as it had been in that courtroom. Proof of everything I'd lived, and everything I'd survived. I lifted it for a moment, then set it back gently. Some truths don't need to travel. By noon, the rain stopped. The clouds broke open into that clear Texas blue that never apologized for being too bright. I locked the door behind me for the last time and handed the keys to the landlord with a nod. There was no grand farewell, no sentimental look back, just quiet closure. The drive to Arlington took 2 days. I didn't rush. I stopped in small towns along the way: diner, coffee, gas station conversations, the easy anonymity of being just another traveler passing through. It felt strange, almost luxurious, to exist without being anyone's daughter, anyone's sister, anyone's ghost. By the time I reached the new base, it was nearly dusk. The air smelled like pine and jet fuel. My new quarters overlooked the training field, where recruits ran drills in the fading light. Watching them, I remembered what it felt like to be one of them, all adrenaline and ambition, before life and family taught me how much strength it takes just to stay calm. The next morning, I reported to my new assignment at the Strategic Operations Division. The office was quiet, professional, all clean lines and gray suits. My new commanding officer, Colonel Reeves, greeted me with the kind of respect that doesn't need ceremony. "I've read your file," he said. "You've had an interesting year." "That's one word for it," I replied. He smiled faintly. "We don't hand out medals for surviving family battles, Captain, but maybe we should." "Okay." "Sir," I said with a small nod. The outcome was enough. He handed me my new credentials and an access badge. "Welcome to the team, Captain Ellis. Here, your name carries weight." Those words hit harder than I expected. For years, my name had been a punchline, something to mock, a placeholder in someone else's narrative. Now, it was just mine again. Later that week, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. It had no return name, but the handwriting was familiar. Victoria's. The first line read, "I heard you're moving again. I hope this time it's somewhere you're happy." The rest was short. No pleas, no excuses, no manipulation. Just acknowledgement, the kind that doesn't come from guilt, but from understanding. At the bottom, she'd written, "Dad would be proud of both of us. You for your silence, me for finally learning it." I folded it once, carefully, and slid it into the wooden box with the verification letter. It didn't need an answer. That evening, the division hosted a private dinner for new staff. Nothing fancy, just simple food, quiet company, and the kind of small talk that never veered into personal history. One of the analysts asked about my last post. I smiled. "Let's just say I learned that justice doesn't always wear a uniform." He nodded like he understood, even if he didn't. Most people don't. When I left, the night was cool and still. I walked down the path toward the flagpole, where the American flag rippled in the soft wind. It wasn't the loud, dramatic kind of symbol people make speeches about. It just existed, steady and unshakable, like truth itself. I stood there for a while, hands in my pockets, thinking about my father's will. That single sentence, "I wish to acknowledge my daughter's quiet, unseen service to our country," had started everything. But now, it didn't feel like a battle cry anymore. It felt like a benediction. He'd seen me, even when no one else did. And in the end, so did the world, but not through exposure, not through revenge, not through noise. Through the one thing that had always been mine, composure. As I turned to leave, the base lights flickered on behind me, one by one, stretching down the path like stars falling into order. Somewhere deep inside, I felt a peace so profound it almost startled me. Not the kind that comes from winning, but from not needing to prove you have. Because the truth is, victory doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just walks quietly out of a courthouse, or drives across state lines, or stands alone in front of a flag at dusk. And sometimes, if you've done it right, it sounds exactly like silence. If you've ever fought to reclaim your peace from family, from betrayal, from the noise of people who never saw your worth, this story is for you. In this community, we believe dignity is the greatest victory. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to fight quietly for your own justice. And if you love family revenge stories and military redemption stories like this, make sure to subscribe. There's always another story worth hearing, and sometimes, the quietest ones echo the loudest.